This is Plastic Adventures.
Take it away.
Hey everybody, it is Steve with the PATC, and I am joined by our co-host Doug. And on today's episode of The Sandbox, the catch-all for all things toy opinions, we're going to do maybe kind of a controversial one today. All we can do when we look at all this stuff behind us here is think about how cool those old toys were, how much we enjoyed them, how awesome they were. But this time we're going to take kind of a step back and take a little bit of an objective look, because just like Transformers, sometimes there's a little bit more than meets the eye. And maybe we were wearing our rose-colored glasses a little bit, or maybe we just happened to love a toy line that wasn't that good, but just shamelessly loved toys and went for it. So
Yep.
We're going to talk about a couple of them today that, maybe they weren't that awesome in the long run. Maybe the engineering was kind of poor. So stick with us as we now talk smack about the things we loved as a kid.
Right on. I like this topic. I think we can go pretty far with it.
I think so too. I don't know if we call this the good bad toys or what, because regardless of what toy lines we pick to talk about, we still love them.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like
Yep.
we got good memories, and even if they weren't that great of toys, we took what we could get back then, and there was a lot that we could
There
get.
was a lot to choose from, which is why we're having such a hard time as adults trying to figure out which ones we're actually going to collect and put in our collection, because we just loved them all.
Yeah. So pretty much, yes, that's what we're going to collect. Yep. So do you want me to start this one off?
Sure, if you want to. I mean, I've got some ideas I want to talk about, but I want to see where you go first.
Well, I'm going to go with the one that hurts the most, so that I can get this out of the way and we can stop the suffering.
Rip the Band-Aid off. Here we go.
And I say this with love, but I'm not so sure that Mask was the best engineered toy line. I think that some of the transformations were really, really cool. Like it was well engineered in the sense that, like, the parts that they moved to convert them to vehicles, the scale of the figures and the stuff that went in. But man, how many Mask toys did you play with where like something snapped or broke instantly? Springs wore out like crazy fast. One little piece got lost or screwed up, or the tires broke off, or I mean, it was an extremely fragile toy line. It was awesome, but I mean, how many Thunderhawks did you play with where after a week you had to start holding the doors up with your fingers because those springs had worn out?
Yeah, one of them that really comes to mind about that, about how fragile they are, is the Firecracker, right? The orange truck.
Yeah.
It had the spring-mounted X in the middle that kind of hold
the scissor kind of a thing.
And then it had the guns that popped out on springs. And then you had the wheel that was a launchable thing off the spring, which never quite worked right. You had a couple of things that were easily lost with those. You had the side-mounted wheel guns. You had the lights that could come off on top of the roll bar. The motorcycle clip that could just get lost really easily. So, I mean, like, and on top of that, it was made from orange plastic, which didn't really seem to last back then, right?
Yeah, it was really brittle.
Yeah.
And if you noticed, a lot of these Mask toys, many of the accessories, they just like snapped on with a very, very small sort of like tension sort of devised apparatus. Do you remember Stinger? The orange muscle car?
The orange one with the kind of scorpion tail thing.
Yeah, it was cool. It had this chain thing that came out of the back, and the tracks flipped out, like the wheels flipped out, and it turned into a tank. And the chrome pipes on the side of the exhaust lifted up, and they were some sort of weird periscope laser guns. God, I don't know what the hell that is, but those chromed out stacks are barely held on.
Yeah.
It is the smallest, tiniest little piece of round plastic that holds on to. Above that, you had like this armored plate that slid up the windshield.
Mm-hmm.
That thing would wear out in like 4 uses, and it would constantly drop back in. Off. And you had a cannon that could fit in the trunk, and that cannon would fit into the armored plate that slid up on the smallest, tiniest there's a teeny tiny peg and it went into the hole on that thing.
Yep.
And God help me if that thing survived a day before
Yeah.
breaking.
Yeah.
So-
Well, and then let's bring up the other one, the granddaddy of all of the mask ones, the Rhino. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So it had like so many chromed out pieces on that, but they were all super thin, like the mirrors, the horns, everything on that thing was breakable. The grill that would punch out, you'd hit the tension on that button was so powerful that it would wear out the grill joint on the front. And so the grill would get wobbly after so many uses because it was just getting thrown out there so hard.
Yeah, that Kingpin hitch cover on the back,
Mm-hmm.
that was super loose. Even when it was new, it was super loose.
Yep.
It was so easy to lose all the platforms. And I get it that certain parts are meant to come off in drop testing.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know how the Chrome survived a drop test because
No, those are super thin. And then, not only that, but you had again thin plastic for the body because the body had this extension function that it had to house the missile, which was on another very large spring that could break the folding roof on the top. That also had a very small rotating like radar thing. So like everything about this screamed brittle, don't breathe on it wrong, right? But
yeah,
we played with them. We
with these all being with these all being tension joints. Sometimes even the tension was too great, and by the time you twirled around that wind vane, which was supposed to be a radar, it was already kind of boring out the hole that it sat in.
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of vehicles that are like that. How about Piranha? Trying to keep the windshield on Piranha.
Yeah, in fact, that's why you mostly see most of the Piranhas out there these days without the windshield, because it had like these two tiny little like clasps that stuck to the forks, I think, if I remember right, the forks of the motorcycle that held it on. And you move that thing once or twice, and those little tiny pegs just kind of dink.
Yeah, a couple of tabs.
And then it just doesn't stay. It just falls right off.
Yep. I mean, I'm lucky enough. I managed to find one of them, but it's like the one of 8 that exist out there anymore.
Like I said, don't breathe on it wrong because you'll pop it right off.
Yep. One of my favorite split seconds vehicles, Wildcat, which was a tow truck that lifted up, and it had like this pizza disc shooter thing on there. It's got these chrome saw blade things that come off of the back of the bed. They're like, what holds those on? Seriously,
I don't know.
It's almost like a little ball joint. So I mean, I love Mask, but some of those mechanisms were just sketchy. They even
really
included
were.
instructions with Slingshot. You remember the minivan?
Yeah.
There was instructions on how to fix the broken mechanism when it didn't work the way it was supposed to work in the toy.
So if you go out and you look for some of them now, you'll see a lot of them have tape residue on the top to hold the minivan together because the clamps were broken.
Well, the fix works.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, what kid? You're like 9 years old. That piece of paper's in the packaging that you just threw away, and within a couple of times of dropping that thing down, you're trying to put it up and it's not seating properly.
Nope.
And mine had an old crusty rubber band around it.
So yeah, I mean, kids in our ingenious ways found ways around that. But yeah, most of the ones I find for that one have tape residue along the spine of the crack where the two halves meet. So
yeah, and there was Slingshot was cool because you had like this mobile command center and this dual thing that came up that there was a jet inside, but that was also like this twin laser cannon. But where the jet clipped on to the track that it sat on broke really easy.
Yep.
So I love
and
that.
Luckily it just kind of sat in there as well. So like you didn't have to, if it broke, you could still kind of get along with it, but still easily breakable, easily lost parts.
Yeah. There was a lot of springs and moving stuff in there, and the springs were just all underpowered for many of them. Rhino was overpowered, but
yeah.
So Mask, God, it breaks my heart it's not that good of a toy line from a playing with it perspective for longevity.
Yeah.
But what a awesome concept.
Well,
Great characters, great cartoon, and we had tons of fun with the toys.
Yeah, we did. Which kind of brings me into the one I want to share. So it's not the toy line is one of my, it's G.I. Joe, right? I do love it. And for the most part, 99% of it is a hardy toy. It's good. You can drop a figure, it's fine. You can probably drop one of the vamps and it'd be okay. You'll get a scuff or two. But they did every once in a while come out with a vehicle that was like, there's so many moving parts on this, and there's so many thin like little clasps. And so the one is, right there behind me, the whale. I mean,
yeah,
it's a holy grail for a reason, right? Most of them didn't make it out of our childhood.
Not at all. Not at all.
The fan blades on the back would snap so fast. You had the little blades on the what is it? You had the vertical stabilizer that had the blades. Those things would be gone. And then there's this little tiny bar on the bottom that connected the two blades. The little nub that connected it would snap right off, like gone. So if you can even find any of those in any kind of intactness, that's like, oh my gosh, because those things would break.
Yeah,
I think the biggest culprit in that one though is the missile arms. They're no big. They look no bigger than a G.I. Joe hanger, like a coat hanger. Like if you were like you put like Duke's coat on, that's the thickness of this little arm that is holding these missiles.
Yeah. Yep. You're right. Some of those vehicles, they were just like cruising for a bruising.
Oh,
they were not destined to last.
So as much as I love G.I. Joe, I have to say that the whale, even though it's one of my favorite vehicles, falls into this category because of how breakable it is.
Yeah, and the one thing that stopped me from doing G.I. Joe as the toy line as a whole, because I mean, dicks and thumbs, man.
I know.
Like those figures, right? Like you actually, if a Joe lost his dick or thumbs in the line of duty, you could actually kind of still stick the Joe in the vehicles and play with them, and they were movable and innovative and really super awesome. So
yeah,
I can forgive that part, but they could have used a little bit softer plastic for grasping accessories. It's okay.
Yeah,
Product of the time, I'll accept that. And yes, probably the finest vehicle, the best vehicle out of the entire G.I. Joe series. The one everybody wants the most is the biggest piece of engineered crap. Like, it's gorgeous. It is like a model. That's the problem. That's the thing that makes it beautiful. It's the thing that makes it hard for a toy, because you're playing with a model.
Yeah.
And I mean, could you imagine you're carrying that toy and I mean, it's never happened, but what if a kid dropped it?
Oh, and it happened.
It turned upside down. Everything is destroyed. Like, everything on top of there is smoked for that toy.
You went from having the best day of your life to the worst day of your life all in one in 3 seconds.
And crying, like unabashedly crying because it hurt so bad that you broke your super sweet toy. But yeah, you're right, man. It's the best and the worst that G.I. Joe had to offer. I can't think of another single vehicle. I mean maybe
they all had some element about them that was kind of iffy in the engineering department. But I think for one that has overall, I mean, the only other one I can think of that would fit that bill would be the Defiant, because it's just so big and bulky. Or maybe the Mobile Command Center, because the pegs on that one were kind of wonky too. But
yeah, they wore out really quick. When I had one, it had these like weird hinge pieces. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing that held it up was like this stand in the back.
Yeah. I mean, I could see the idea. It was basically one of a tackle box on treads is what it was, but it didn't hold up together. But I'd have to, of those three, I think the whale would be the one with the most brittle pieces, even back when it was new.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue for the things that held the blades onto the helicopters. some of those took a thrashing really quick, but I don't know if that was more because kids crashed the helicopter and it busted the little,
Yeah.
brackets that held the blades in. But yeah, that the poor whale, I didn't even think about that, but you're 100% right. That's a tough one.
What else you
Another
got?
one that kind of sticks out on my list is Star Ears, which is the Zoids takeoff, and even Zoids from back in the day. They were held together, not Star Ears, but Zoids had these weird little like rubber gromp like nuts.
Little tiny pieces that you would put on a peg.
Yeah, and they didn't hold very well. So if you were trying to play with these things as an actual toy, boy, they were awesome with all the wind-up features. And I love those cockpits with the little shiny drivers inside of them. Super cool. But if you're trying to sell Zoids as a toy to somebody, they're really not a good toy at all. They're a wind-up model kit. And
well, they've gotten better in recent years. They're actually still going strong. There's a huge community for these things and their model kits. But if you go back to the very early ones, like you're saying, there were some problems with those.
Well, I got way into Zoids for a while when they were showing that new Zoids cartoon on Cartoon Network with the Liger Zero and the Shadow Fox and all those. I thought that was a terrific cartoon. They battled in the big Zoids, and it was kind of these tournament things that they did. But even then, buying those model kits, you knew that you were buying a motorized model kit, not a toy. So Star Ears was all these humanoid shaped things with wind up elements to them. And they had great designs. They had vac metal and, like some of them had a wind up deal. They usually had either a mechanism in their arm or it was in the chest. Right. And they had the saw blades that would spin. One guy just had these wicked looking, like, it was like this bladed fork that came out. The leader of the good guys had these dual cannons that would move. Awesome colors. Boy, I mean, just like some of the tan and the blue and stuff was really good with the gold. And boy, you just wanted to love them when you saw them as a kid. Again, all of them had heads that had a little human, like a silver driver inside or a gold driver.
Which I thought was cool as hell.
Me too. I mean, I would bite those things apart so I could get the little driver out of there. Those little guys fit inside Optimus Prime's medic thing that was in his trailer. Yeah, so not that I chewed a Zoids thing apart to get the little guy out or anything. That takes some, by the way, you got to want it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we got these Star Ears figures and they were put together. A lot of the plastic was hollow. And again, it was a lot of tension. The arms and legs weren't even like real flanged pegs. There was just a straight peg that came out of the joints, and you slipped the arms and legs on and let plastic on plastic tension hold them. So
which after a while just wore right out.
Boy, within days. Within days. I got Hot Shot as a kid. They had them over at Griggs. They weren't like a super common thing that I remembered as a kid here. So I was over at Griggs in Pasco and I got Hot Shot. And I remember playing with it for a few days and then I just couldn't keep the arms and legs on anymore. So it kind of is flying under the radar. You don't see as many Zoids people as you do. We're starting to get a lot of Brave Star and Black Star and all these obscure Dungeons and Dragons is resurged as like a collector's toy line.
Yeah.
Zoids isn't quite there yet, or Star Ears isn't quite there yet, but that was just one
it'll get there. I mean, I know that there are some diehard fans out there for those things. So
yeah, and I have them on my shelf back there, but if I sneeze a mile down the road, those things want to get loosened up and fall down on the other toys. So yeah. That was really disappointing. It's a good bad toy line.
Yep. So
what's next on your list?
So mine, I got. So these are not the main toy lines that we liked, but so this calls into the category of toys that I think people knew about, but the idea was cool, but it was just really bad. Not necessarily a bad design, but there were so many parts and pieces to them that they could easily get lost. And so two of them are very similar to each other. They were called army gear, and they were called computer warriors. Do you remember those?
Yes. Yep.
So what the concept of this was actually really cool, taking some everyday army gear like a canteen or a compass or a grenade or a computer part for the computer warriors like a floppy disk or a microphone or something like that, right? And turn it into this kind of toy set that would transform and become this base with a
an environment
or something like that, right? So cool idea. I actually really thought the idea was cool. The problem is it has the same problem as Mask. You have very thin plastic, a lot of jointed pieces that over the use of maybe 3 or 4 times would pop right off.
Yeah.
And the pieces, some of them were so small, you would lose the pieces within a day of getting this thing.
Oh, seconds if you open it up
if
in
you
the
open
car.
it in the car. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the chances of getting one of these remaining intact a week after you got it for your birthday were really slim, because you wanted, with the army gear ones, you wanted to play with them like they were army gear, right? You wanted to take the canteen out and turn it into a aircraft carrier, which was a cool idea, but the freaking joints on those things would just snap right in pieces. And
didn't the
guys
canteen
were like
work?
big, man. They were tiny.
Oh yeah, they were like just slightly bigger than the pilots of the Star-Ears heads and the Zoids. Yeah, they were teeny tiny. Didn't the army gear have a little functionality to it? They tried to give it some, like, would the canteen hold water? Or
the canteen would hold water. The compass, it really worked. The grenade didn't, obviously, but the gun I think had
the gun didn't kill people. What a rip!
But the gun had it opened like this, right, to have a base. I can't remember if it had something that, I think it had a rocket that would shoot out in either both the base form and the gun form. Which
I think so. It was an incredibly obscure toy line. Like, it was, who put that out? Was that Coleco?
It was either Coleco or Galoob. It was one of those.
One of the two.
But I mean, did I love them as a kid? Hell yeah. I mean, it was exactly what I wanted, right? But when you get one of those computer warriors and you get the floppy disk that opens up and the joint breaks right out of the pack, like, holy crap, it's like NECA, right? Like NECA these days. You try to take a NECA thing out of the package and the arm falls off. That's the way these things were.
Yeah, the only time that these things lasted more than a couple of days is when you waited a couple of days to open them.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I either had the binoculars or the canteen. I think it was such a short-lived experience.
They were.
I think it was that quick that I got it and played with it for about a day until everything was lost and broken and missing.
I had the canteen as well, and it folded out into an aircraft carrier had a really cool F-14, which again, very brittle. So cool toy. Execution, engineering, but man, if we brought those kind of toys back with today's methods of 3D printing, and some of the plastics that we use, which are more durable, kind of the beefier, rubbery kind of plastics, I think they could last a little bit longer. We could probably get some more use out of those, especially the computer warrior ones for today.
Yeah, I think there would be room in the market for something like that, because you had, like, with these army sets, you actually had multiple soldiers, so you could play out like who's good guys and who's bad guys, and it came with some additional elements of play. So you're right. As a toy line, I actually really liked it to play with, but boy, what a piece of crap. That's a good bad toy line. Good bad toy line.
It was great idea, but damn. Another one of those where you just cry after you got it.
How about,
and then you come up with some weird way to fix it. You would be like, well, okay, if I can use tape and a staple, I could probably do it. I could probably make a joint that would fall apart.
Half of the play value was fixing your stupid broken ass toy. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's another one that hurts, because there was some really good designs in this line, and at a time when Barbarian Fantasy was so big with He-Man, what happened with Remco? How did we arrive at that very, very odd A-shaped brittle plastic ball joint for the legs on those
Yeah.
figures.
Yeah.
It had to be more expensive to have that little setup in those toys than a rubber band stuffed into the leg sockets like He-Man.
Yeah, I don't know.
Unless it was a patent thing, maybe they couldn't do it because of
Oh well.
the leg band was a patented connection device, and only
But
Mattel could
if it
do
was
it.
a patent thing, then why didn't they get him for the stance? Because those guys sat in the same squatty stance with the same kind of muscular builds as the He-Man. So
Well,
I
I
don't know.
think it's because aesthetically there's a certain amount of creative license that you can take, but I'm wondering if mechanically it was a patented, like Mattel patented that leg band. Had you ever seen those on other toys?
No, I haven't.
No, you saw Migos held together with rubber bands. By the way, honorable mention, love World's Greatest Heroes, brittle
Yeah.
rubber band held everything together. Love those toys. Crap toys,
Yeah.
but they're good crappy toys.
I
But
absolutely loved the Remco Warlord series that came out, but it was another one of those that suffered from really bad plastic
engineering.
and engineering. So Warlord, the Warlord figure I liked, but you know, again, a day out of the package and the wings would fall off of his head, or his cape that was supposed to be a vinyl thing would rip very easily. It was one of the easiest rippable plastic pieces I think I've ever encountered.
Yeah, Warlord was a cool design, and there was a lot
Yeah.
of sub characters that were in there too. And Sunman and Sun Gold and these other anything Remco like that's built that way, with that weird little A-shaped ball joint hip connector thing, looked really good. But boy, that was just a really risky way to build figures. They had despite this, I would really like to find a Conan figure with his sword that wasn't $200,
Yeah,
because they did a Conan line that, looking back on it, like that would look so cool next to all those Masters of the Universe figures back there. But
well,
find a Conan that doesn't have a busted hip.
yeah.
Find one with the sword for under a couple $100, and you're lucky to do that.
Yeah.
So
I feel the same way about Warlord. I think back in the day, I probably owned 6 Warlords when I was a kid, because I just kept going back to the store and buying them because they were so cheap. But I love the figure. If I could find another one now, it would be great. Them big wings on the side of his head, that sword, that rapier sword that he had, very cool.
Now there's something about that always kind of bothered me. Like, is this big beefy guy and he uses a rapier?
Yeah.
Oh man, should have been an axe. Should have been a cool sword. It comes with a rapier.
Yeah, but I mean, tell me a cooler, manlier figure coming out of the comics than Trevor Morgan. I mean, he was a pilot, found his way to Middle Earth, and like was constantly surrounded by women in bikinis and other dudes trying to kill him. So he was wielding a sword and a gun. I mean, the dude was manly. I mean, he was cool as hell. So great character, not so great figure.
No, toys, awful, crappy toys, cool designs. It brought a lot of extra dimension to your play with Masters of the Universe and maybe in a time when you could. What were the Warlords? Are they about like $250 a piece?
Oh, they were
like
not
that?
expensive. They were not.
Yeah,
expensive.
and He-Man had a retail for about $5.
Yep.
So, you could either buy Cobra Khan, who was clogging the shelves, or you could get these very cool design but crappy built figures for half the price.
Well, some of them would come with cloth accessories. They had cloth capes. They came with like axes and clubs. So they looked cool. But they just did not stay together.
No. And they had a whole series of AWA wrestling figures too that were based on that same kind of Remco build. And can you imagine bending joints on wrestlers, trying to put someone in the figure 4 or something, and how easily that just like destroyed those joints? So Remco in general, everything that they produced, because of that one major engineering flaw.
Yep.
We loved them, but they were really bad toys.
Yep, I agree. I absolutely agree. There's a couple more toy lines I think we can throw in here if we want to go into another segment real quick. But if we're going to do that, I think we should probably take our non-sponsored commercial break. and come right back to it after these words from our non-sponsors.
All right.
You can imagine the prehistoric past and the distant future coming together in one creation. Zoids. You can pretend that they're creatures from the age of dinosaurs, or that they're futuristic monster machines. Each Zoid requires assembly, and though their appearance is strange, you can wind them up and let them move freely about your home. Zoids. Each is sold separately. They're made by Tomy.
Who puts the future in your hands?
Robotics.
Who gives you robots to command?
Robotics.
Who lets you build fighting creatures wilder than a movie feature? Robotics. You create them, you control them. Who puts the future in your hands?
Robotics.
Who gives you robots to command?
Robotics.
R2000 comes with what you see here. Batteries not included. R1000 sold separately from Milton Bradley.
You can make a good guy better. Iron Force. Roll 'em. You can make the bad guys badder. Roll 'em into battle. Wheel warriors. Quick changing fighting machines.
All vehicles in the Wheel Warriors collection are sold separately. Some parts not for use with some toys. New from Mattel. Watch out! Beast Walker is coming. Can Trailblazer stop him? The Ultimate Basket coming soon.
All right, we're back from that commercial break with some more toy lines that were either so good they were bad or so bad they were good. I don't know how we're classifying this one, but it's
We loved them. We loved them, but they kind of sucked.
yeah. So to start this next wave off, I thought of one that I absolutely loved as a kid because the idea was cool, but accessories again were the bottom of the barrel in design. So do you remember Crystar?
Yeah.
Okay, so the gimmick with Crystar, of course, was the thing I absolutely love, which is clear blue, clear green, clear red plastic crack, right? I love the idea of it, and because it just looks really cool. But the problem with that, when you come up with clear accessories that fit into the hands of these small clear figures, they were easily broken.
Yeah.
Very easily broken. Crystar's sword and Crystar's shield were made of very thin blue see-through plastic, and the handle would snap if you forced it too hard into his hand. The shield handle would break as well. So it was one of those where it was like, I love the look of them, but if you tried to play with them with any kind of strength at all while you were playing with it, the accessories would snap in their hand and just make you cry.
Yeah, I agree. My mom worked at Kmart when I was really little, and she brought one home for me, and he was like accessoryless in no time.
Yep.
And then you just had like Crystar Mr. Clean.
Yeah, and then he's just bald Mr. Crystar, right?
Yeah. I got one that's kind of goes along the line with that, but Ertl's version of the A-Team, the 3 3/4 inch figures, all really bad, all made out of super brittle plastic. None of them held their accessories right. All of them were done in the old school, what do you call it?
Non-swivel arm.
Straight arm. Yeah, straight arm, like the straight arm Joes, but the plastic was like way worse.
Yeah.
I swear to God, you
most of them couldn't even hold their guns.
No, I mean, like almost the instant that you put the gun into the hand, the thumbs break. So it's really hard to find any that are intact.
And they didn't, except for their heads, they didn't even look like the characters.
They were just, they're just rando bodies. Like there was 2 different body types, and they changed like orange, blue, green, and black was their jumpsuits. So they didn't even make an attempt to make them look like the people from TV, other than their really disturbing head sculpts on some of them.
Murdoch's face is just straight up crazy.
Yeah.
But their bigger figures, actually, I enjoyed them a lot.
Yeah, those were much better. You know, they came with a big loadout of accessories. The handles on the guns could be more robust, but those were actually good. But Ertl's A-Team 4-inch figures were just the drizzling craps.
But if you can find an Ertl A-Team van, you've got yourself a good find.
Yep. And I love them. I want to collect the other three. I've got Murdoch, and I would like to have, intact face, BA and Hannibal, but they are just absolutely piss poor construction material and build on those figures.
Well, to go along with those, the Mego counterparts of like the Dukes of Hazzard or Buck Rogers, they were also made in that G.I. Joe design, but just very poor plastic.
Well, Hasbro took that model and really ran with it and maximized what you could do with that sort of like O-ring construction on those figures. But
which I still think is one of the more superior action figure designs if done the way Hasbro did.
Absolutely. Now, the only way that could have been improved upon is you remember Cops?
Mm-hmm.
They're like big O-rings, but their hands were made of a more pliable plastic, and their hands were in the forearm, and they actually had movable wrists. But just going to that pliable plastic meant that you could take those guns and wedge them in there and get them to be straight. So that would have been the only way to make O-ring better. You can take the O-ring out when it breaks, for goodness sake. So
and Visionaries, by extension, were also very well, although the accessories that they came with were a little odd, didn't always fit in their hand, and then they had these weird like hologram tabards. I don't know what they were, staffs with a picture on it, I guess, I don't know, but but the figure themselves were actually really good.
Good designs. They might have been a little bit better than Joe, or lasted longer than Joe, just because they were more robust. They're a slightly bigger scale, like so
a quarter of an inch bigger than them as well. So they were just slightly larger,
beefier hands and stuff. But so they didn't make my list as a bad toy. Ertl A-Team did. What's next on your list?
Let's see. Silverhawks.
Yeah. Yep.
Another one of those, they took the toy, the cartoon idea, the Vac Metal. I mean, I love Vac Metal. I think it's great. But I think they kind of relied on that a little too much, because what they lacked and everything else, they also lacked in articulation. So it wasn't really great. I think they could have done a little bit better with the design of some of them. I think they could have still had the snap out wings or the snap out arms to allow the wings to have them. But I still think that they could have gave them an elbow articulation.
Well, one of the biggest issues is that for Vac Metal to work, the plastic has to be extremely stiff, which means brittle. And there's a lot of figures that shoulder joint for when you worked the action with the legs and it put their arms out like that. That shoulder joint was brittle plastic with a little peg into brittle plastic.
Right.
So not only did the Vac Metal chip off like instantly, I mean, how many of us had Transformers that lost the Vac Metal in like a day? Yeah. Yep. But it was like 100 times worse with Silverhawks. That was all gimmick and no toy. Cool cartoon.
The plastic, so the wings had like 3 plastic points on them, right? They had the plastic nub that connected it to the back. And then they had the plastic cuffs that connected them to their arms, which were very thin cuffs, right? So I remember mine breaking, and I remember the peg in the back would get really loose. So again, I love the Silverhawks. I mean, I still love them to this day. It's a great cartoon, and if I can get my hands on a Silverhawk toy, I'm not going to pass it up. But it was still a shit toy. It was a very bad toy.
Almost the most drizzling of. Yes. Really, really horrible toys. Maybe not as bad as some of the others, but they 100% deserve to be on that list of.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Poorly engineered.
It's weird how you can like Like you can acknowledge that the toy is crappy. It's a crappy toy. I know, but I still want it. I still love it.
I'll take 2.
Yeah, it's crappy and it's great. Okay.
Only the worst toy I've ever played with ever. I'll take 5. Yeah. I got one that I loved to death when I was a kid too. And when I fell in love with toys, I fell in love pretty hard. It isn't the absolute worst, but there's a lot of parts of these toys that broke very easy. And the whole gimmick that they were built around did not work very well. And that is air raiders.
Oh. It's supposed to have air launchable missiles that you do it and they go.
Yeah. Get those missile launchers some Viagra, because it was pretty awful. But they came with like squads of guys. I mean, I can't remember any vehicle that came with less than 2 characters. Yeah. And some of them had like, they came with like the drone guys or the regular green shirts. And then some of them came with like the painted sergeants and captains. Right. I love those toys. I love the base. I love the design. I love that the little guys had like sculpted in lasers on their hands and stuff. And the bad guys were very simple. So for $20, you got like a small good guy vehicle, small bad guy vehicle, and like no less than 2 action figures per. And I will contend that if the action figure is only going to move in one spot, let it be the shoulders.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of play value to be had there, even if the legs, they could sit down, but I don't remember if the legs moved independently or not.
I don't think they did. I think both of the legs came up at the same time.
Yeah. So it was a really cool concept, cool designs, but again, nothing worked.
Nothing. The air function didn't work, and that was the biggest disappointment. I mean, I had what was it called? Is it called a Windhawk? Is that what it was, with the kind of the X-wing looking one? With
yes,
it had like an air bladder in the back
was the
that
name.
Connected 2 tubes to these missiles, and it looked cool as hell. I mean, I love the design of this thing, but you squeeze that thing to your heart's content, and the missiles would just
I'm sorry.
So disappointing. The whole gimmick. It's in your name. Air Raiders. Where's the air?
Yeah, it's like the premature ejaculation of toy lines. It's pretty awful.
It wasn't cool.
But
and then
cool
they had
figures and cool designs. I will say though, some of the canopies and the pieces were held on by very small spots. So again, it was kind of like Mask. You take these toys to play. How'd they pass the drop test? But
I have no idea.
Like there are certain pieces that would just break. Like there was a vehicle called the Storm Dagger, which is this little sailboat looking thing that has a big like translucent canopy, and it was held on by 2 points. And if you dropped it on its top, they just broke. Like you're done with your Storm Dagger, you might as well just have like this little orange lifeboat with 2 guys in it. It doesn't go.
I actually have one without the canopy, because the canopy, you can't find it anywhere.
Is broken. Yes. Yeah. My point exactly. What's next on your list?
Okay, so I know you like this one. I know you like this line. But I also have to think that the reason why it's so expensive to find these days is because the accessories were very breakable. And that's the Inhumanoids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their accessories were, the idea behind them was very cool. Each of them had a kind of gimmick that would attach to their arms and kind of create what they were as a character. But they broke. And they wouldn't just like break. They would like.
They broke.
It wasn't great. And so you'd be stuck with this figure with a half broken accessory that had one good connection point, but everything else was broken on it.
Yeah, so I have now collected those, except for Liquidator, because that's like $200 to get a complete Liquidator. Herc Armstrong, the green one.
Like they're cool action figures.
Yeah,
they're cool
his
story.
grappling hook, the grappling hook character, and it had like a piece where you could twist up the grappling hook, and it was really cool. but that red plastic, I don't know. I think that was made out of the same shit that disposable cutlery is made out of. It's just like snapped. Not only that, but I don't know if it was the blend of silver plastic that they used, but all the cool like steampunk stuff that was around this armature, it all just like comes off.
Yeah, I know.
Just like out of nowhere, just comes right off of there.
Well, and
The other
and,
issue-
and weren't their helmets were very cool, but also weren't their helmets like, didn't they like, they were again attention with plastic on plastic, right? They had like little
They-
connection points, little groove, right? That the helmets would connect to, but over
Yeah.
time that would lose its.
Honestly, I think that it wasn't so much the helmets, but you're right about that. Like if that ridge wears out, then the helmet never stays. The leg joints on those,
Oh,
they're cut at an angle so that when you kick the legs forward, the
They go
legs
out.
kind of spread out a little bit to sit in a vehicle. And when they stand up, the legs go together like pretty tight. So as you're trying to play with this toy and move their legs, it's really easy to bust them out of the joint because of the weird, funky articulation cut. They're not straight like a Star Wars hip,
right.
where you're just straight forward like this, and you can sit them down in the vehicle with their legs. These actually just, they splayed out as you lifted
Yeah.
them up. So then they
You
came
remember,
back down.
Playmates Star Trek figures did exactly the same thing. They were the leg joints, the hip joints were cut at a V. So
Yeah,
when they went down, they went out, and they. I mean,
Yeah, those
half of
guys
them
are-
practically did the splits.
those are some robust suckers, though. Those
Yeah, they
Galoob or those Playmates figures, no complaints there. That thing lasted forever. But yeah, you're right. Inhumanoids was a very cool concept, and I loved the cartoon, and it was dark and different. But yes, a lot of super crappy elements that just made those like, it wasn't as much the Earth core, right? Like they have their faults. Find a decomposed that's
Oh,
not
God.
broken into a
Oh,
million
yes.
pieces. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
That
the
rib,
monsters
that
are
rib
even-
cage just, and the joint on the head and everything, nothing held together. So
Yeah,
completely poor engineering. And yes, the joints wore out really quick on the monsters. Some of them had telescoping parts that wore out really, really quick that were just held together by tension. So yeah, you're wise to bring up beloved Inhumanoids.
but
I don't
mean,
love it as
But other than that, I mean, I still love them. Right? They're still excellent characters. They're still excellent. I mean, they look beautiful sitting on a shelf. Just if you ever get one, don't ever touch it again.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Leave them be. Leave them up there. Leave them alone. Okay. So you said Inhumanoids. There was one we talked about really quickly off air, and I'm going to bring it up. This will be the last one that I have. I think you got a couple more.
Okay.
You brought up Voltron. Yes. Those 80s Voltron figures, there was always something like the knee joints wore out super quick on the Matchbox version, which is considered the best version for symmetry, and it had die-cast parts, but Black Lion's tail never stayed in, and it was easy to break the teeth off the lions, and the hip joints, everything was so heavy on that toy that they wore out like instantly. The vac metal came off of them. It did stay together. So if you want to play with that as Voltron, the toy stayed together, but it got really wobbly and worn out.
Did.
And it was awfully heavy for a little kid's toy back in the day.
Yep.
Probably the one that hurts me the most to say about Voltron is the ugliest, but my most favorite version, the Panache Place Voltron, with 1,000 easily losable and breakable accessories. And it actually fit the 3 3/4 inch pilots in the Lions, which is why I love it, because there's that element from the show. You got to pretend on the Matchbox version, but in Panache Place, you got figures in the Lions.
And even though they
connecting.
were a bit bulkier design than what you saw on the cartoon, it was still a cool idea to be able to have your figure inside the Voltron line.
Yes, that was the whole point. Those 5-point of articulation figures, some of which were good, some were crap. But that again, that's a toy where you get them all connected, and they had this strange connection feature where the tails of the lions held the whole thing together. So it's keyed in by the lion's tails, which are brittle plastic on tension on tension plastic,
Mhm.
which wore out super quick. And like you had shoulder joints where it locks in, but then you have to move his whole shoulder forward instead of at the arm. And that thing just, God bless it, I love it to death. The cockpit's broke and came off really easy. So once that happened, your pilots will not stay in Voltron when you're playing with it. And that's usually within a couple of days, especially on the legs. The cockpits will kick open and your figures will spill out of the legs. So I love that toy, but boy, is that a piss poor piece of engineering.
It absolutely is. And that's really sad because it's a great idea. Again, right? Combining toy, you have multiple elements, a multiple character type toy that can turn into a larger robot. Anytime you can turn a smaller robot into a larger robot is a win in my book. But
well, yeah,
you know,
5 independent lions and the drivers.
Yep.
So here's your mask thing where you got the driver and the robot and the vehicle that does stuff.
Mhm.
And then it turns into a big robot that kicks ass and cuts everything in half with a big sword.
Yep.
But not to mention they never made bad guys to fight it.
Yeah, they did.
What, like a coffin?
Oh, well, no. Not like an
tank?
actual robot. No.
Yeah, you didn't have any Robeasts to fight it. There was never like a Robeast that you could stick Prince Zarkon in or Hagar the Witch.
I saw somebody online print 3D print some of them though. They made some 3D printed them.
Well, that would be cool because this Panoche Voltron's like 14 or 15 inches tall by the time it's all combined together.
Yep.
And Voltron fought like a tank.
Yep.
Wow. I mean, that must have just been like, you know, they go through that really cool transformation sequence and the da 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 da,
Yep.
and all form the head. Oh, form blazing sword. Well, that was a fun playtime. Not a big monster that could fight it or anything. If you had Shogun Warriors, you could have used them as
I love Shogun
Robeasts.
Warriors.
Yeah,
That was a
those
great
are
toy.
cool. No complaints there. So
I'm
I'm done. I'm out.
okay, so I do have a couple more, but I don't think I'll bring them up. I'll bring up one more that I think is a good example of it. So Starcom.
Oh,
Starcom is a great idea, and actually, when you had it, it did last for a few months. But it was one of those toys like Transformers that you loved to play with over and over and over again. So much so that the gimmick wore out quickly.
yeah.
So, but what Starcom had in its favor was multiple gimmicks. So it had little figures that had magnets on their feet with multiple magnet points.
Yeah.
And that's not even that never stopped working. The magnets were very cool, very good idea. The big problem with Starcom was it had multiple motorized points. And I'm not talking like electrical motorized. These were pneumatic motorized points.
Yes.
So basically you would fold it, which would get the gears wound up into a tight position. And then you would hit the release button, which would release that pressure, and then it would pop out. The problem with that is that over time and over multiple transformations and getting this going, that would it would get weaker and weaker and weaker every time until you'd get stuck with this. It'd be like, "Nyeh." Then you push the button and it'd be like, sorry, no,
Yeah,
we're not working anymore.
Nothing but plastic sprockets inside of there and gears.
But it still was a good line, and I love to play with it. Like I said, it had multiple gimmicks. Some of the smaller ones would like transform into blocks that you wouldn't think are pretty cool, but the block system would they would transform into cargo and would fit into a larger vehicle, which was a great idea, right?
Yep.
Because that was the whole point of this Starcom, was that they would go to places and then you'd unload this vast of equipment, and then they could transform into something else.
Yeah, Starcom is very mask-like, with the little drivers, and they're all different personalities. And I got to give it to them. They sold those little figures individually.
They did.
And that made you want to spend like $4 on a little like 1.5 inch tall figure.
It did. But the problem with that little 1.5 inch tall figure, Steve, was those visors on those little tiny pegs that you would lose
Right away.
So fast.
Right away. Yeah.
And the backpacks had little tiny pegs that would fit into little tiny holes on their back. Snap.
Uh-huh. Some of them had
So,
tubes and stuff
they
that
had
would
little
plug in.
tubes. So
You
eventually,
drain the plastic and it's broke. Yeah.
well, so eventually you'd be stuck with this half transforming, maybe transforming toy with a broken figure that couldn't hold any of its accessories. But for the first month, it was a great toy.
And you knew you were in trouble. I'll tell you exactly how you knew you were getting into trouble. First times you're transforming it, you push the unlock mechanism for it to pop open, and it goes like really high pitched and loud.
Yep.
And it went really quick. As soon as that thing started going and opening, it's a lower tone. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
we're fragged now. Maybe I shouldn't transform it as much. Then it'll nope. Click. Click. Click.
It's the equivalent to like fidget toys back in our day. Transformers, things like Transformers, Starcom, anything that had a gimmick was like a fidget toy. We could put it in our hands, transform it, click the button, ooh, yeah, transform it, click the button, ooh, yeah, and you would do that for hours. So your little toy would get worn out so quickly.
Yeah, you're right. Starcom wasn't even on my radar, but that's actually kind of a crappy, awesome toy.
It is.
That we loved.
And it's like we said before, I love it. I still want it, right? I still want some that I don't have. But I recognize that they could have done things a little bit better, especially with those little accessories. I mean, you give a kid a little action figure with little accessories, what's he going to do? He's going to lose them.
Yeah.
That should have been known. That should have been. And they didn't even offer accessory packs, Steve. Like, they knew we were going to lose these things, and they didn't give a shit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, just buy a whole new one. Tell your parents it's broken. Cry. They'll buy it for you.
At least G.I. Joe gave us accessory packs to replenish some of the figure accessories we broke, but no, not Starcom. They didn't care.
No, and unfortunately, Starcom might have been a little ahead of its time. I heard that was an intensely expensive toy line to produce, and that I think that's what put Coleco out of the business.
I can imagine. I mean, they had great sets.
Yeah,
I mean,
the mechanisms,
the magnetic sets were awesome.
I mean, everything was was individual tooling, no shared parts. Maybe on the figures themselves, maybe there were a couple, but the vehicles themselves, I don't recall seeing many shared parts, maybe shared engineering styles, but that was extremely expensive, and NASA was a big deal back then. They shot for the moon on that one, and I think that was the end of it for Coleco.
Well, they almost got it. They almost nailed it, because those toys are still highly sought after. I mean, collectors still want them. The problem is finding any that are in decent enough shape that you would even consider paying the money for to even try to complete. Right?
Yeah, and the white plastic is completely yellowed by now. Yeah. So
I still to this day want that. There's that huge space jet looking thing that has the red laser cannons and the cargo space in the back. Yeah. It's all mechanized and magnet. No thanks. Not for the ones that I find. Some of them do not have hardly anything, any accessories on it, and almost all of them are yellowed. Every single one.
Yeah, I want to say that in even remotely okay shape, you're over $1 bill to get that one, probably in the mid hundreds. The yellowing, I'm comfortable with contending with, but it's a pretty big deal out there for people who aren't willing to do a peroxide suspension type of a peroxide vapor treatment that I do. And even that doesn't last forever. You got to go back to some of them and retreat. But yeah, that's a good one. I know that you wanted to mention GoBots.
I did, but
earlier.
I left that one off the table. But since
that's because you're wrong, though.
Dude,
actually, there are some that
okay. So real quick,
some of them you're right. Some of them you're right. I'll give
real
that
quick.
to you.
I won't even talk about the actual line of the little GoBots. let's talk about when GoBots went to try to go to the same size as the Transformers. Do you remember the larger
Super
GoBots?
GoBots, yeah.
Yeah, those guys, those were loose and janky as all heck. They were so bad that all they did was fold up their legs and fold up their arms on the inside. And you did that once or twice, and the arms were laying, and you couldn't stand them up because the elbow and the knee joint where they folded in, because they were die cast on plastic.
Yeah.
The metal would rip that plastic apart.
I had a Super GoBot Leader 1 that I didn't really transform. I just kind of had it on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. That metal, that die cast on plastic, that did have a tendency to wear joints out.
It did.
What I do like about most of the GoBots is that unless you really, really reefed on it, most, not all, most, their arms and legs would stay intact.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that wasn't like some of the Transformers cars when you swiveled the waist around and it was on the tiniest piece of plastic possible.
Right.
But you brought up Copter. His arms.
That dude's arms would always break.
His rotor blades always broke because on that vac metal had to be on that hard plastic, like we said earlier, and it was very brittle. So, yeah, there were a few that kind of fell victim to it, but by and large, most of the time it took something pretty drastic to break a GoBot's arm or a leg.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you did.
That's okay. I'm going to say I'm 50-50 on that, whether that was a crap line that we loved. But most definitely Starcom. Yeah, that's definitely on the list. Yep.
But, you know, as we've said before, it didn't really matter to us if it really was a crap toy, honestly. And, you know, trying to look at it from an objective point of view now as an adult and an engineering standpoint, honestly, it really doesn't matter, because what we are looking for are the memories. We're looking for the joy that we got as a kid. Short-lived as it may have been, we were still looking for that joy of holding that thing in our hand again. So it does its job.
And we're not doing much of the playing now. It sits on the shelf safe in a state of like very brittle old plasticitis. So it hurt to piss and moan about those toys, but hey, it was what we had at the time.
Yep.
We still had all the memories. So on behalf of myself and Doug, I apologize to all of the toy lines whose feelings got hurt by tonight's events.
But we still love you.
I love you, but you suck balls.
Yeah.
You know,
and we mean that in the nicest way possible.
Yeah, you got serious problems, Starcom and Remco, but I love you anyways.
But we still love you. Yep.
Yeah, I'll be your abusive partner any day.
All right, I think that brings us to a close for this show. Thanks for joining us tonight on our rambling as you join two old men talk about playthings from their past. And we're very opinionated about it too, so I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, and you know, next time around we should have Tony back with us. There might be a couple of other special guests in the works too. So we have friends.
We do. We do things outside of this. I mean,
like they don't like call us or talk to us or want to hang out with us, but we like got friends, right? Right?
Friends are supposed to talk to you. So I say. So I hear. I don't know. Anyway, Steve is my real only friend, and you're going to listen to us complain about everything that we don't like about.
Well, to take a lyric from Tenacious D, as long as there's a toy, there will always be friends. As long as there's a record, there will always be friends.
Very true. I like that. All right, we're going to leave it on that note. So thanks for joining us tonight. As we always say at the end of each show, please join us on Facebook over in Steve's group with the Plastic Adventures toy community. And if you feel like it, follow me on Instagram for the Toyman 80s. Leave a like, leave a comment, and maybe we'll get back to you.